Okay. And just 1 minute. It's loading to YouTube. And then I'm going to make more. All right, you are the host. There you go. Just 1 minute. It's loading to YouTube.
Okay, that worked.
Okay. So I'm sure others will come in. Now, just keep in mind that as people come in, you'll have to admit them, I think, from the room, the waiting room.
Yeah, I see. Okay.
I should have done it beforehand. We don't have the mantra in here.
Oh, mantra?
Oh, no, I was talking to my wife. Do you want me to do a little kirtan or something?
Yeah,
Okay.
please.
All right. All right, just 1 second. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Rama, All right, I'll stop right there. I kind of flubbed on the last part. Thank you so much, Dayananda Prabhu, for joining in and giving us today's talk. I guess you're set up on your end, so we can just go forward. Today's topic is seeing Krishna with anointed eyes of love. Well, thank you so much. I'll let you take it away.
Jai. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Milityam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Makhyam Dadati Sapadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarane. So this time I selected eyes with it, as you see from this, the translation, the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts with the eye of devotion, tinged with the salve of love. So the last talk I gave was Wednesday. Wednesday was Shastra Chakshu, or seeing through the eyes of Shastra. And I also discussed this idea of seeing through the eyes of Shastra yesterday. I gave a little talk for the 22nd Avenue people. So the one point I made at the end of this talk that I omitted on Wednesday was that we tend to see Shastra from the perspective of the world around us, from the perspective of modern society, our modern influences, modern morality, modern mores, modern conditioning. And that's by extension the conditioning of our own bodies and minds. But the idea of Shastra Chakshu is not to see the Shastra in that way, but to see the world through the eyes of Shastra. It's the reverse. So anyway, I just wanted to make that point. This verse is very sweet. Prabhupada quotes it often throughout his literature, throughout his writings. And as a matter of fact, sometimes he even quotes it without mentioning the verse itself. He just makes reference to the fact that one can see Krishna with eyes tinged with the salve of love. Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santak Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti Yang Shama Sundaram Achintya Guna Sarupam Govindamadi Purusham Tamahang Bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Sham Sundar, Krishna himself, with inconceivable, innumerable attributes, whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts, with the eye of devotion tinged with the salve of love. This is a purport by His Divine Grace, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Thakur. The Shamsundar form of Krishna is his inconceivable, simultaneous, personal and impersonal, self-contradictory form. True devotees see that form in their purified hearts under the influence of devotional trance. The form of Sham is not the beautiful, not the blue color visible in the mundane world, but is the transcendental, variegated color affording eternal bliss and is not visible to the mortal eye. On a consideration of the trance of Vyasadeva, as in the shloka Bhakti Yogena Manasi, it will be clear that the form of Sri Krishna is the full personality of Godhead and can only be visible in the heart of a true devotee, which is the only true seat in the state of trance under the influence of devotion. When Krishna manifested himself in Braja, both the devotees and non-devotees saw him with this very eye, but only the devotees cherished him, eternally present in Braja, as the priceless jewel of their heart. Nowadays, also, the devotees see him in Braja in their hearts, saturated with devotion, although they do not see him with their eyes. The eye of devotion is nothing but the eye of the pure, unalloyed spiritual self of the jiva. The form of Krishna is visible to that eye in proportion to its purification by the practice of devotion. When the devotion of the neophyte reaches the stage of bhava bhakti, the pure eye of that devotee is tinged with the salve of love by the grace of Krishna, which enables him to see Krishna face to face. The phrase "in their hearts" means Krishna is visible in proportion as their hearts are purified by the practice of devotion. The sum and substance of this shloka is that the form of Krishna, who is Sham Sundar, Natavara, or best dancer, Muralidhar, holder of the flute, and Tribhanga, or triple bending, is not a mental concoction, but is transcendental and is visible with the eye of the soul of the devotee under trance. So this is a wonderfully revealing explanation of this verse. One more time, the verse itself. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Sham Sundar, Krishna himself, with the inconceivable, innumerable attributes, whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts with the eye of devotion, tinged with the salve of love. Again, about halfway down in the second paragraph, second sentence, it says the eye of devotion is nothing but the eye of the pure, unalloyed spiritual self of the jiva. Such a wonderful statement. People often ask, or people often challenge, can you show me God? Just like Hiranyakashipu challenged Prahlad Maharaj. Where is your God? Prahlad Maharaj said, everywhere. So people want to know where is God? Why can't he be perceived with the senses? Well, they think that God is, somebody may believe in God or not believe in God. It's simply a matter of belief. But China, for me, the country of China is also a matter of belief. I've never been to China. I've never seen China. But here, it's not a question of belief. It's a question of sense perception. And what does Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada say? He says the eye of devotion is the eye of the pure, unalloyed spiritual self of the jiva. And how is that, how can we see through that eye? He explains clearly that Krishna is visible in proportion as their hearts are purified or as their hearts are cleansed by the practice of devotion. So we can't see through that eye of the soul until we cleanse off the impurities off of that eye. So here's another verse I thought was interesting. I did a search of Prabhupada's literatures based on Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena. So he uses this phrase in the purport. This is one of my favorite verses because it speaks about yagya. Yagya Shishtashana Santo Muchante Sarva Kilbishai Bhunjate Te Tugang Papa Ye Pachantyatma Karana. So the Santo, the devotees of the Lord, are released from all kinds of sins because they eat food which is offered first for sacrifice. Others who prepare food for personal sense enjoyment verily eat only sin. So Prabhupada says in the purport, the devotees of the Supreme Lord, or the persons who are in Krishna consciousness, are called santas. So as in the verse, Yagya Shishtashana Santa. Yagya Shishta means, ashana means to eat, and Yagya Shishta means to eat the remnants of Yagya. So devotees, we could think that this just means that devotees offer their food to Krishna. But Prabhupada explains further. Santa, they're called santas. And they are always in love with Krishna as it is described in Brahma Samhita. Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santa. Santak Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti. The santas, being always in the compact of love with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda or Mukunda or Krishna, cannot accept anything without first offering it to the Supreme Person. Therefore, such devotees always perform yagyas in different modes of devotional service, such as shravanam, kirtanam, smaranam, archanam, etc. And these performances of yagyas keep them always aloof from all kinds of contamination of sinful association in the material world. So this is an interesting explanation of yagya. Paging back, Yagyashishtasana Santo. So the verse is very simple. It says that the devotees who take the remnants of yagyas are saved from all kinds of sins, whereas those who enjoy the remnants themselves eat sin. So that's very simple. But Prabhupada explains further. He says that all the aspects, all the limbs of devotional service, these 9 limbs he's referring to, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, that Prahlad Maharaj explains in the 7th canto, or he reveals in the 7th canto, these limbs are also yajnas. So yajna is the ancient system of the Vedas. Yajna is the practice that distinguishes Krishna consciousness, or it distinguishes those who follow or attempt to follow the Vedic tradition and the extension of the Vedic tradition. Yajna especially is one of the prominent items that distinguishes those people from others like Jains, Buddhists, and in the modern era, vegans. This yajna is something that we embrace as followers of the Vedic tradition. But Prabhupada explains that when we perform these limbs of devotion, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Archanam, hearing, chanting, remembering, and offering worship, these yajnas keep one always aloof from all kinds of contamination of sinful association in the material world. So let me page back up to the original purport. This is the purport given by Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada on the verse. And again, he says in the last paragraph, 3rd paragraph, 1st sentence, the phrase "in their hearts" means Krishna is visible in proportion as their hearts are purified by the practice of devotion. And then again, Prabhupada says, devotees always perform yajnas in different modes of devotional service. So that just means that devotees perform devotional service. We already know what Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, etc. But these are yajnas. So whenever we read yajna anywhere, we can understand that yajna means devotional service. This is what the acharyas are saying. This is what Prabhupada is saying. This is what the other acharyas in our line are saying to us. They're saying that yajna means devotional service. But others, the last paragraph, others who prepare food for self or sense gratification are not only thieves, but are also the eaters of all kinds of sins. How can a person be happy if he is both a thief and sinful? It's not possible. Therefore, in order for people to become happy in all respects, they must be taught to perform the easy process of Sankirtan Yajna in full Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, there can be no peace or happiness in the world. So this is another aspect of yajna. Here in the next to last paragraph, we learned that the different limbs of devotional service are yajnas, but then devotees take as something very special in their hearts, because we are followers of Lord Chaitanya, we take this Sankirtan Yajna as something very special. So when I began to read some few decades ago, maybe 25 years ago, I started to read the Bhagavad Gita in a little bit different light. I kept noticing this, Krishna was using the word yajna throughout the Gita. Of course, he uses yoga. There's mention of yoga. We learn about karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga. But still, the use of the word yajna. So why is that important? Why does Krishna speak about yajna? Well, now Prabhupada explains. Yajna and the limbs of Krishna consciousness are non-different. But more important to devotees is Sankirtan Yajna. Excuse me. Yajnaik Sankirtana Prayaya. Yajantihi Sumedhasa. So the Sumedhasa, the intelligent people, they worship Krishna through Sankirtan Yajna. And Krishna appears along with his associates as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Panchatattva. So this Sankirtan Yajna is indeed an extension. It's based on the Vedic system. We are not interested in rejecting the Vedic system like others, like, for example, Jains and Buddhists. So with all respect to them, they're maybe wonderful people and they may be very sincere about their spiritual practice. But this abandonment of yajna is not helpful. Yajna is the key to clearing away the sins. We are naturally inclined to this material world. Now, sin in the Christian tradition and sin in the Vedic tradition or in the Vaishnava tradition is different. They call it, sometimes the Christians say, sinning against God. Well, in some sense, there's a similarity, but our sin or fault, sometimes the word fault is in the Sanskrit is interchangeable with sin. So our fault is that we're attracted to Maya, that the senses are magnetized toward the sense objects. And that causes us to be bound in this material world. And as a result of that magnetic attraction, desires develop, and those desires cause us to be, as I said, entangled in the world, in this world with family, and Prabhupada says fallible soldiers, meaning all of our friends, our family, our community, our nation. So all of these things surround us. We become very attached to these things. You can see, especially now that people are bewildered by the onslaught of this suffering of the potential for death. People are talking about, oh, 100,000 people are dying from the virus. But in fact, I looked on the internet, it's some 1.5 million people die every year. So, and everyone who's born dies. So this concern about death, that may be fine, that they're concerned about disease or whatever they're concerned about. You know, they want to overcome cancer or virus or whatever it might be. They have rules for driving properly so people don't kill each other while driving. So all these things have to be administrated, that's fine. But as Yudhishthira Maharaj said, this idea of avoiding death or being in denial about death, even though we've seen it everywhere, even though we know death is coming, even though we know people that we've experienced death in our lives, our parents have died, maybe our children have died, maybe our friends have died, some relatives have died. We know death is certain, and yet we deny it. I love the saying, apparently there's a Bengali saying called funeral renunciation. So this is one of my favorites, that when somebody goes to the funeral, one realizes the imminence of death, and that how we're just carrying on in this world without a care for the imminent death. And that's funeral renunciation. We feel a little bit detached from the world and inclined to become spiritually awakened. And then as upon leaving the funeral, immediately forgetfulness. We immediately forget. So death, it's a very interesting phenomenon. So how to overcome death, how to face death, how to get away from the faults, the fault of being attached to Maya. Maya just being the allurement of the sense objects, the allurements of this world. The allurements of this world are simple. They're what our eyes see, they're what we hear, they're what we smell, they're what we touch. So these are the allurements, what we taste. It's simple as that. It's the objects of our senses. That's Maya. Sometimes we take it that Maya is somehow this complex thing that's conspiring to interrupt all of our plans and getting in our way somehow, like a Satan, some kind of a invisible being that's rising up from the depths of the earth, or some kind of a demon. But Maya can be simply understood as the allurement of the sense objects. And our business is, that's our fault. That's our sin, is being attracted to those sense objects. It's such a simple matter, and yet so overwhelmingly difficult for us to overcome. It may take us lifetimes and lifetimes to overcome such attachment. We are bound to this world, but in a sense, that bondage comes because we embrace the world. We ourselves are the ones who are binding ourselves to the world. So what cuts that bondage? Of course, many things. We say knowledge cuts the bondage. We say devotion cuts the bondage. But yajna, since ancient times, since Vedic times, yajna is especially meant to sever, or to cleanse, rather, our sinful actions. It's meant to cleanse us from these things that we do in the world that cause us to be attached to our senses, to the sense objects. So in practical terms, how does that work? Of course, we see that yajna is expressed through the different modes of devotional service, as on this page in the first sentence. Modes of devotional service like Shravanam, Kirtanam. But yajna works in another practical sense. Yajna implies, as we learn from this same third chapter here, this is taken from chapter 3, verse 13. Yajna works in that we use our money, we use the results of our work for sense gratification. There's a common concept that's quoted throughout the literature: dharma, artha, kama. So when we do dharma, that means when we act responsibly. Dharma simply means principle. Principled, when somebody is principled, it's natural that money will come. I think that most people in the modern world understand that, especially in this country is an affluent country. So when somebody follows the rules, they get money. There may be some exceptions. Somebody has bad luck or something, but in general, by following the rules, we get money. People who don't follow the rules, who won't accept the system, who are rebellious, who, may have too much misfortune in life, and it prevents them from being rule following and law abiding. They are prevented from getting money. But my experience is that simply by following the rules, money comes. Maybe hard work, yes, of course. You have to be a little bit careful, or apply yourself in one way or another, maybe have a little background, some kind of talent. But we learned that everyone has a talent. Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, everyone has some talent naturally. So by following the rules, so dharma, then artha. Artha means gain, something that comes from being a principle, human. Then what do you do with artha? Kama. You use it for sense gratification. So this is considered to be the normal activity for a dharmic person. But Krishna teaches in the Gita that no, that artha should not be used for sense gratification, not directly. He says that money should be used for yajna. So here in this verse, yajna shishtasana santo muchante sarvakil bishai bhunjate te tugang papa. So the santas, they use the money for yajna. It's the others, the papas, the papis, those who, that sounds funny, like Spanish, those who are sinful, they bhunjate, they enjoy aghang, they enjoy sins. Because they pachanti, they cook simply atma karanat, simply for the purpose of themselves. So this idea of cooking and offering in yajna is, in a sense, symbolic. It contains much more meaning than that. One, we learned that yajna contains the idea that yajnas are devotional service, the limbs of devotion. But two, yajna means that in practical terms, as Krishna explains in the 3rd and 4th chapter of the Gita, that the goal is to sever this attachment to the artha, dharma, artha, kama. What's another word for artha? It's karma phala. Karma phala means phala means the fruits, and karma means work. So the fruits of work, to sever the attachment to the fruits of work. How is that done? That's done by offering it in yajna. And how do we learn about the yajna? What did we learn about yajna? Different modes of devotional service. So we use our money to increase our involvement in Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Archanam. We purchase pictures, we try to purchase books, we try to enjoy the literature of Krishna consciousness. And then ultimately, in the last sentence, we perform the easy process of Sankirtan Yajna in full Krishna consciousness. And there are so many festivals that we can sponsor. We can spend millions of dollars on festivals like Rath Yatra and the appearance of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Prabhupada was writing at one point, I think 1969, Prabhupada was writing Shyam Sundar. He said, now the appearance day of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is coming up. He said, I'll come to London and you can organize a great procession. Maybe it wasn't 69, maybe 70. You can organize a great procession, and we will walk together along with George Harrison. I will walk with George Harrison and you in the parade for the celebration of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Prabhupada was very eager to perform these kinds of public festivals as demonstrations of Krishna consciousness. And when Rath Yatra in London was finally organized for the first time, and they went down Oxford Street, which is a famous, people who know anything about London, they know Oxford Street. It's a famous shopping street like Fifth Avenue in New York. And then it went down Oxford Street and it ended up in Trafalgar Square, where there's the monument to Lord Nelson. So really the heart of London, the monument to Lord Nelson. So Prabhupada was very pleased that such a public festival, such a public demonstration of Krishna consciousness in one of the hearts of Western civilization. And then later, a few years later, down Fifth Avenue in New York, ending in, of course, Washington Square Park, maybe not as grand as Trafalgar Square, but these kinds of demonstrations of Krishna, public demonstrations of Krishna consciousness as components of Sankirtan Yajna. Sankirtan Yajna has many components, but these celebrations of Krishna Lila are purifying to devotees and also to the public. So why purify? Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada says, the phrase "in their hearts" means Krishna is visible in proportion as their hearts are purified by the practice of devotion. We purify our hearts. We try to adopt the limbs of devotion, Shravanam Kirtanam. We embrace the process of Sankirtan Yajna to purify our hearts, to become detached from the allurements of the world, so that our heart becomes purified, so that our soul can see Sham Sundar, Govinda, the primeval Lord, Sham Sundar, Krishna, who has inconceivable, innumerable attributes, and whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts, with the eye of devotion tinged with the salve of love. Such a beautiful metaphor. Okay, I'll stop there. Anyone have something to add?
I don't like the word sinful so much. You know, it can come off a bit. You know, it has this modern day stigma to it. It comes off a bit dogmatic as well. It's hard to digest in this current day and age. But I liked how you kind of were able to relate it to our Vedic culture and our understanding of it as well. But when introducing these topics, it can come off a bit, you know, heavy to say that if we don't offer our food, it's sinful. You're eating sins, you know. So I feel as devotees, we kind of have to curve things a bit and make it more easier to digest for those who may not be so aware of our views and the way that we see things. But I wanted to point out something aside from that I read in the 6th canto of Bhagavatam, where it was Prabhupada saying that if a devotee accidentally performs some sinful activity, which is basically impersonalism or any sort of act which is going against the understanding that God is a person. The Lord will excuse him, but one should not intentionally perform sinful acts. So I like this understanding. This really shows out the personal feature of Krishna, meaning that we're all neophytes. We're all prone to making these mistakes and becoming more attached to material things. And due to that attachment that takes place, Krishna is willing to excuse it. But if we do it intentionally, consciously, we try to lord over material nature and we try to become God ourselves, and then that's when we do not get excused. So that was something I'd like to share with in regards to sinful activity. But I find that word, it's so strange how it has such a deep impact just because of how I've been raised growing up, and especially probably over the past 20, 30 years. This word sinful activities, it's like immediately my mind is just saying, come on, pump the brakes, relax a little bit. I don't want to get chastised here. So just sharing a few reflections.
Well, I have a couple of responses to that. I agree with you. There are a few words that at first I was just kind of giving up these words in my vocabulary that I didn't like, but excuse me, but I found that it's impossible for me to stop using these words with devotees. But I speak two languages when I speak. I speak one language with devotees and one language with people outside. So with devotees, I have no problem using certain words. Like there are many words that devotees use. I think it's unfortunate that devotees are not really trained to view the idea that there are two languages. Sometimes for example, in Bengali, they have these two sort of dialects or whatever you call them. One is Sadhu Bhasha and one is Chalit Bhasha. So Sadhu Bhasha is old Bengali and it's highly Sanskritized. Chalit Bhasha is modern language. It's common vernacular. So I think of devotee talk, spirit, soul, living entity, preaching, sinful activities, even the word Krishna consciousness. Consciousness, since the 1970s, has been variously interpreted. Using that word can be misleading. Spiritual, the word spiritual, I feel, for me, I don't use it right from the get-go when I speak to people. The word religion also, all of these words in my practical experience are charged words. They mean something. I just saw on YouTube this man, he's a scientist, I think a statistician. He was saying that people who are following religion have declined. He showed a chart from early 1900s and how from decade to decade, the followers of religion have declined. And he said with the influence of Western civilization, religion will continue to decline. So why should we associate? I'm not going to associate myself with something that's being phased out, or it's not good. It's like I'm trying to sell some product that's being phased out. Listen, I want to sell you I have a whole stock here of these old 1980 computers that everyone else uses for doorstops. This is what I want to sell you. I'm not going to sell you something that's being phased out. So frankly, I don't like the use of the word religion. Just from that perspective, I don't think it's good sales. So I try to look at my language. I've studied a few languages, so I guess that gives me a little preparation for speaking a different language in public. At first, I was trying to not use these words in connection with devotees, and I found that was silly. But yeah, I'm conscious, and I think it's a bit of a discipline or an art to try to figure out how to do it. But even more important than that, I think that what's the real art is to communicate Krishna consciousness by cultural translation. And this is extremely difficult and controversial, how to do that without watering down the message of Krishna consciousness. We should try to present it within the modern cultural context. Now, I view that as a kind of translation also. It's speaking the cultural language. But if, for example, Krishna West, I feel, is an attempt to make this kind of translation, cultural translation. I don't, personally, I don't agree with every with every aspect of that cultural translation, but I admire the fact that there's an attempt to make that cultural translation. Now, I think it's important for for preachers to try to figure out what that is, to try to figure out how to make that translation without watering things down. Our position, as I said in the beginning, our position is not to communicate the Shastras or the concepts of the Shastras so that people can view the Shastra from their perspective or from the perspective of the modern culture. Our position is to communicate the Shastra as a lens through which we can see reality. So sometimes when devotees try to make that cultural translation, in my opinion, they make the mistake of presenting the Shastra. When I say Shastra, I mean the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. They make the mistake of presenting the Shastra within the context of material society, of modern society. It's more difficult than that. That's too simplistic. It's too easy. It has to be the other way around. Somehow or other, we have to convince people to see the world through the eyes of Krishna consciousness. And that's partly what this talk is about, that's the way we see Krishna. It's through the eyes anointed with the salve of love. We certainly don't see Krishna from our position as conditioned beings attached to the material world and with our hearts covered with that contamination. We can't see. So it's our duty to somehow, it's a difficult job, but somehow or other we have to try to figure it out. And certainly by experience, we have to become experienced in dealing with all kinds of people, with all kinds of misconceptions, and learn how to convince them that they're seeing things from the wrong perspective. So I've given a fair amount of thought to these things, and I think that's why I kind of presented this two-part talk. First part is Shastra Chakshu, and the second part is Premanjana Shurita Bhakti Vilochanena. So Prema Anjana. Anjana is like I think Anjan. I think this is still used in Hindi, the ointment. Premanjana Churita bhakti vilochanena. Churita means the vision. Bhakti vilochana. Vilochana means to see, and through bhakti. So we see through bhakti with the eyes anointed with the, or maybe churita means anointed, with the salve or the anjana, like mascara. We put on the mascara of love.
So, Prabhu, I have a couple of points. I have to get off here pretty quickly. I've got some stuff coming up, but two points. One is I 100% agree with I mean, what you're talking about is code. It's called code switching, which you've probably heard that term before, but it's part of what I do for a living, and that is, you know, switching from one mode of communication to another based upon your audience. And active code switching actually takes about 3 to 5 years of conscious trying to do it. So, you know, somebody that's been speaking devoteeese since 1975, you know, might have a difficult time, if, you know, but Dayananda Maharaj talks about how anachronistic, you know, certain devotee contexts can be, because it's when you go into certain devotee contexts, it's like you're in 1974 or 1975, you know. So, but anyway, one of the arguments that I've been making off and on for like the last 20 years with regard to quote unquote preaching, which is again one of those loaded terms that Bhagavan Narada pointed out, is that a lot of preaching in a lot of temples, even preaching that even temples that have active preaching programs, they're geared towards preaching to people of Abrahamic traditions. The most success even now today, as in like, you know, daily talking to people about Krishna consciousness, are not with Christians, not with Jews, not with Muslims, but with neo-pagans, witches and neo-pagans. So, and that's a totally different, you know, place to, that's a totally different paradigm as far as the language to be used and stuff like that. So I think a lot of the preaching too, you know, one can't assume that one's audience is going to be Christian or whatever, you know. You got, and that goes to, you know, you've got to get to know the people who are coming to your temple, who are, you know, getting involved in such, because if they're coming from a bona fide place, if they are bona fide seekers, they're going to see the value in it, the truth in it, you know. Even as, like I was discussing last night with somebody, she was saying, you know, she was going to make some banana bread, and I said, well, yeah, I'm going to make banana bread too. Mine's not going to have eggs in it. I said, because it's sattvic. And she's like, what's sattvic? So I, you know, I explained, you know, goodness, and I said, well, eggs are frowned upon because they're chicken periods. I said, I know that's weird. And she said, no, it's not. She says, I don't eat eggs as eggs for that same reason. You know, so there's some acknowledgement there, right? So somebody who's actually seeking, so that's a, in other words, that's a doorway, that's an entrance into the larger context. You know, and I've had a difficult breakup recently, because of circumstances, not because we don't care for each other, whatever. But we probably talk more than we did as a couple, and we're talking about Krishna, you know, and she's constantly telling me, thank you for introducing me to Krishna. And part of how she you know, gravitated to Krishna is, you know, is the fact that, you know, she believes in an eternal goddess and God, you know, and that's very easy to communicate as Radha and Krishna, you know, and then beyond, and then from there you go into, you know, eternal love and the loving exchange and all bit. But you know, we have to look for these entrances, you know, these connections. And the other thing I wanted to bring out was that beautiful purport that you read from Srila Prabhupada, where he's talking about, you know, the pure devotee being able to see in the heart, you know. And because I was watching, I like to watch the Following Srila Prabhupada. By the way, for everybody who's watching, Dayananda Prabhu is featured on the second one, at probably about 15 minutes to the end. Dayananda Prabhu's on Following Srila Prabhupada. But I was listening. I like to listen to those while I'm chanting, because for one thing, one of the devotees points out that early on in New York, before they had a Prabhupada Murti, they had a film of Prabhupada, and they would just play the Prabhupada film and they would just chant. And that was their Prabhupada Murti. But my point being is, you know, I kind of like, it kind of makes me feel like I'm connected with Prabhupada and the devotees and such. But anyway, my point being that I was watching a piece where Prabhupada was in India in 1972 in this area of Vrindavan where Srimati Radharani is conducted her pastimes, and there's just the beaming smile on his face. You know, it communicated to me that here is the real devotee of Srimati Radharani. You know, here is the person who can see and know and understand Krishna, Radha and Krishna. You know, and so that takes me to that purport. You know, so anyway, that's my.
That's nice. I like, no, I haven't heard that term, code switching, you called it?
Yeah, code switching. It's most commonly used when talking about switching from African American vernacular English to quote unquote standard English.
Mhm.
That takes 3 to 5 years of active trying to do it.
Mm.
So because sociologically speaking, and this actually ties into what you're saying about, you know, devotee communication too, is that the way that one speaks, accurately or not, gives a message, sends a signal about how one is going to interpret one's intelligence or one's validity, right? So a devotee might be trying to trying to communicate some very important piece of Shastra, but the way that it's received as this weird archaic thing or whatever, based on how it's being, you know, communicated. Whereas this is extremely controversial again, but I've heard Dayananda Maharaj give a class where he doesn't say the word Krishna, doesn't say Krishna's name once, and uses classical Western philosophy, you know, to communicate a Krishna conscious point. You know, so he's getting the point across, he's communicating the philosophy, but he's doing it through Western philosophy for a Western audience, you know.
Yeah, this was something that Tamal Krishna Maharaj, actually it was the last time I met him before he left, and maybe 1 or 2 years before he left. And I was in charge of 26th Avenue, and I said, Maharaj, what do you think, which direction do you think I should try to go? And basically indicated that same similar direction that Dayananda Maharaj is taking, not exactly, not that I should do Krishna West or something, but that, try to communicate, establish some means in New York for communicating with Western sort of, I don't know how you would call them, intelligent Western people, obviously intelligent, but sort of standard Americans, even from 1969, 1970, Prabhupada was talking to me about that idea, to communicate with these kinds of people. So yes, we need to work on our language skills. I think that's one thing, of course, language, but also cultural language, communicating culturally. And there can be different opinions about how to do that. That we should have. I mean, we have to take inspiration from Krishna to do that. We can't be mindless robots and think that, oh, you know, this is the way it's always been done. This is the way we should always do it. No. Yes, Prabhu. I mean, Mataji, Sri Devi.
First and foremost, thank you for the class, Prabhu. I want to just very gently point out that Srila Prabhupada said his books are the law books for the next 10,000 years. At some point, Srila Prabhupada also said, I'm sorry, I cannot dilute the philosophy to please the Americans. So I don't think we should fight shy of saying it like it is. I mean, I preach, I would say, I share Krishna consciousness with so many other people who are not devotees. And I find that they're very open and they're eager to receive something because their souls at least can hear this is the absolute truth. What Srila Prabhupada is giving us is pure transcendental knowledge that is not available anywhere else. Everywhere you go in today's world, everyone is, fudging the truth, sugarcoating it, trying to make it nice, saying, yeah, you can get by, yeah, it's okay if you do this. But Srila Prabhupada is non-compromising. He's saying it like it is, These are the four sinful activities. These are the four sinful activities. There's no getting around it. You cannot claim that illicit sex is okay because, we were out of the marriage anyway. And now, we didn't get a divorce yet, but because I like this person and she likes me, I think it's okay because it's not okay. It's just not okay. So I'm just giving an example. I say, I've stopped eating meat, but on occasion, I don't mind a piece of fish, because I think fish is not as bad as meat. It's not okay. So I'm not saying I'm going to tell this to a non-devotee. I'm going to say, hey, what you're doing is wrong, sinful, etc. What I'm trying to say is we have to be convinced. First and foremost, we have to have that conviction in our own selves that this is it, and how to present it is a different story. But just yesterday, Guru Maharaj was saying in one of his lectures that Srila Prabhupada mentioned 8,000 times, and he gave about 2,100 lectures, that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So on an average, in each lecture, he mentioned it at least 4 times. So why should we shy away from saying that? People don't know who is God. People don't know his name is Krishna. How can you love someone whom you don't know? So I'm very much of the opinion that we should first and foremost read Srila Prabhupada's books nicely. And then we should, of course, pray to Krishna, meditate, mull over how to present it nicely. But we shouldn't shy away from speaking the truth. That Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. These are the 4 sinful activities: no illicit sex, no meat eating, no gambling, no intoxication, no getting away from that. These are the 4 pillars of sinful activity. And if only these 4 things were stopped, this whole world would be different. Srila Prabhupada said this place could become Vaikuntha. So as devotees, we are the ones who are going to save this world in its darkest hour. This is our mission. This is our challenge. And we as soldiers of Prabhupada just cannot shy away from saying it like it is. We may not hammer the truth on someone's head if they're not willing to listen. That's different. But in a setting where we are asked to represent the Hare Krishna philosophy, or we are asked to speak the Krishna conscious philosophy, we should be very strong in what we believe and what we stand for. They say that if you have nothing worth living for, then you have nothing worth dying for. So we have been given such a matchless gift. And I believe it is important for us to speak the truth as it is. Maybe I'm coming across as a fanatic or whatever, I don't know. But I believe just being faithful and true to Srila Prabhupada's words will make me an effective preacher. That's just my humble take.
Okay, I have 2 reactions. First is, of course, we're talking about, Kurt was mentioning, Kurt and I were discussing, I think, 2 things. One is this code switching. Just like we speak Spanish to somebody, if possible, if somebody is a native Spanish speaker, we'll try to speak Spanish as much as we can, or whatever language, for the comfort of that person. Or if they don't understand English at all, we have to switch our language in order to communicate. That's practical. I observed, for example, that when German devotees learned how to preach, they learned from sort of hippies or whatever and they were using 1970s slang. So in the 1970s, there was a term "far out," which meant, extraordinary. So I personally, I try to, I use these slangs, but with certain people, but for formal speaking, I don't use slang, and because people don't use all these kinds of different slang. Now, a term like "far out" is too, it's dated. It's not popular. It's more like "awesome" would be used today. So, but I noticed that the German devotees carried it long into decade after decade because it became part of the devotee speech. So just like living entity became part of the devotee speech, so far out became part of the devotee speech. So I think, one thing is code switching. So but what I didn't hear you criticize that. But what you said was, I can give you two examples here regarding your, that you just have to tell it like it is. I had a very dear friend, Atreya Rishi. Well, he's still my good friend. Atreya Rishi was a very intelligent, wonderful devotee. And he told me that when he became a devotee, he traveled around the United States. He went to the Denver temple and he became very impressed with this devotee named Harinam. So Harinam was, he was slightly mentally unstable. He was a very intelligent man, but very interesting, kind of eccentric personality, and very devoted to Prabhupada. And Atreya told me that he liked this Harinam. Harinam was preaching to him. Now Atreya is from a completely different perspective. He's a very sophisticated person. Now he's a multimillionaire. He graduated from Harvard Business School. He has internationally traveled, raised in Iran and Turkey, and so. But he told me he was impressed with Harinam, who's eccentric, and I'm sure Harinam, I know for sure that Harinam just presented, as you say, the philosophy very directly like this. So that's certainly an argument in favor of what you're saying. But on the other hand, there are many charismatic devotees now, like some prominent ones are Radhanath Swami, Dayananda Swami, Indradyumna Swami. So these are some of the ones that come to mind immediately. Now, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj. I once saw Tamal Krishna Maharaj do something similar. It was right in the beginning of we were very young devotees. We went to give a program at this religious group, and Tamal was given the opportunity to speak, and he spoke in this really charismatic way, and he made this analysis of where these people were coming from, and he presented a kind of Krishna consciousness, but within the context of what they were believing. And so they all came to the temple. A bunch of them came to the temple afterwards. And then they found out what Krishna consciousness was. It wasn't really what Tamal presented. So I've seen both ways that, and when Radhanath Swami, or for example, Bhakti Sarup Damdar Maharaj, who was a very dear friend of mine. I love Bhakti Sarup Damdar Maharaj, who unfortunately, like Tamal, passed away too early, maybe 2005 or something, I don't. So Sarup Damdar Maharaj met the Pope once, and he worked regularly with, he was a PhD in biology, and He worked regularly with the Vatican. And so preaching directly in every circumstance is a matter of experience and choice, and it may not be possible just to boldly preach to every single person we meet. One time I was recently I got a ride by Uber to here in San Antonio, and I had a dhoti on. So the Uber driver says, "What is that?" I said, "It's Hare Krishna." I said, "Have you ever heard of Hare Krishna?" And I think he said, "Not really," he wasn't familiar. I said, "Oh, Hare Krishna, it's Indian, it's like Hindu." I didn't say anything really to him. And we talked about his military service, or we talked some mundane topic. I was asking him about himself. And when I got out of the car, I was very surprised. Just as I got out of the car, he said, "Hare Krishna." So I really feel it's a matter of judgment from being in Iran and interacting with people there and learning in that context, being very sensitive to who the individual is and how that individual can accept Krishna consciousness, or in what context that person can accept Krishna consciousness. I think that helps to make the cultural communications. And as I said, it's really through experience, and it's an art. And I absolutely agree with you that we don't want to water it down to make that cultural communications. But in some cases, it may be sufficient. For example, Dayananda Maharaj he holds a certain position. You and I don't hold that position. Dayananda Maharaj can be introduced as a guru of the Krishna people. And then he can talk about anything, but he's talking about it as the guru of the Hare Krishna. So just his position, maybe, I'm just making an argument here. I'm not trying to say that this is the final word on this, but when Radhanath Swami, for example, he's in full sannyasi dress. He goes everywhere. Apparently, I've never seen a picture of him without him in sannyasi dress. He's in full sannyasi dress. So if he's introduced to somebody like Mick Jagger, I understand that he did meet Mick Jagger. So Mick Jagger is a famous singer in the West. Most people in the West and through Latin America, and he was married to a Latin American woman, and so mostly throughout the modern world, people who listen to popular music, for 50 years, people know who this man is. And he's performed for President Clinton and all these people. Everybody knows who that is. So when Radhanath Swami meets him, I don't know what Radhanath Swami says to him, but I would pretty much guarantee that Radhanath Swami doesn't mention the four regulative principles. So I think it's a matter of judgment and experience. And yes, if we if we're uncertain, then we probably should rely on traditional presentation of Krishna consciousness. That's certainly a safe thing to do. Two things that I heard over the years that I thought were very interesting was in Mexico, Prabhupada gave a lecture wherein he was saying that the first thing we should introduce is spirit soul, not the body. He said that was Krishna's first thing that he introduced in his second chapter of. So the first instruction was, you're not the body, you're spirit soul. Not the four regular principles, but something that's a little philosophical. And frankly, I was very impressed with this concept when I first heard it from Prabhupada. I thought, wow, what an amazing concept. Now, Indian people may be more accustomed to this idea, but to make the clear distinction between soul and body, that's not really in the Abrahamic traditions. So this is one thing that a concept that Prabhupada introduced. I like that very much. Another thing is that when devotees were going to preach in the colleges, there's a letter actually to Dayananda Maharaj, who was early on was involved in college preaching. Prabhupada said, do not first talk about the four regular principles. The students they won't like that. So there is a strategy for preaching and how we introduce things. And I feel, just like Bhagavan Narada said, that that within Christianity, there is this concept of sin, and there's a morality that Christians emphasize. We also emphasize no meat eating, no intoxication, no gambling, but no illicit sex. But it's not, if we look at it philosophically, it's not really equivalent to the Christian concept of morality. I feel that it's important to first communicate the philosophy, because our philosophy of dhyato vishayan pungsa sangasteshu pujayate sangat sangjayate kama kamat krodho vijayate krodhat bhavati sangmoha sangmohat smriti vibhrama. So that concept of contemplating the objects of the senses and developing desire, kama, I don't hear that within Christianity. I don't hear the mechanics of sin. It's just don't do sin. And a lot of Christians or ex-Christians, they rebel against this idea. I just feel guilty. I feel guilty. Well, that's fine. I mean, I feel guilty also, but I understand the mechanics. I find that it's such a beautiful thing that we understand the mechanics of sinful activities. And we have a whole section of the Bhagavatam about prayashchitta, which the Catholics believe in. Prayashchitta means atonement. So you go to the priest, you atone for your sins, you say, dear Father, this week I used the bad word 4 times and I was glanced at somebody lustfully, or so then the priest says, go chant 4 Hail Marys and light a candle and go. So, but Prayashchitta in the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam talks about an elephant bathing in the river, and then again he gets out and rolls in the mud. So we understand Prayashchitta doesn't work, but Kechit Kevalya Bhaktya Vasudeva Parayana. So Bhaktya means through devotion. So our philosophy is so deep and so analytical. and Christian philosophy, and in my view, of course, I'm prejudiced, I have to admit, in my view, Christian philosophy is not so deep. It's not deep like that. It's not communicated so deeply. Maybe some Christian thinkers, some saints or some writers somewhere, some monks who have been meditating on these things for decades, they write something, but who reads these things within the Christian populace? So commonly Christians, they haven't been exposed to philosophy like we have. So I feel that, yes, we should communicate the philosophy directly, but we should also understand the language of culture in such a way that if we use the word sin, immediately a Christian or an ex-Christian may be turned off by that word. They may think, oh, that's just the same old talk of morality that I've been hearing since I was a child. Whereas what we really want to communicate is Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsa Sangasteshu Pujayate Sangat Sangjayate Kama. And that these four pillars of the age of Kali are the big things that they're the big stumbling blocks in developing this Kechit Kevalya Bhaktya, the developing unalloyed devotion for Krishna.
Yeah, I completely agree that we have to be very, very delicate in our approach. We have to see who is our audience. We have to see where they're at, what they're seeking for. And the first and most important thing is to develop a warm, kind, caring relationship before we even tell them anything, because that's what Srila Prabhupada did. He first just gave them love and lots of prasadam and just said, chant Hare Krishna. He never even mentioned the regulative principles. So it's a process, and we have to gradually lead them, so to speak, up to where they want to inquire more, understand more, engage more, and so on. So I completely agree with both you and Bhagwan Narada and Kurt when you say that you don't want to hammer the philosophy. That will just drive them away. So we don't want to do that. We want to be kind and welcoming and caring. But when push comes to shove and we are asked questions, there's no, not just there's no need, there's an imperative need to present the philosophy in its bare bones, that this is it, this is how we do it, this is what is wrong, this is what is sinful, this is what is going to block your advancement, this is what is going to. So if someone goes deeper and deeper and asks questions, then we present the philosophy, in the way in which nothing is left ambiguous or hidden or obfuscated. We should be very clear in presenting it as it is. That's the only thing I'm trying to say. And of course, I agree that we must look at the audience and then present the matter in such a way that it will actually appeal to them. It will draw them in. Maybe all they're ready to hear is Krishna is this beautiful blue boy with a peacock feather, and he dances and he sings and he's always enjoying himself. And that's what our Sunday feast is about. So why don't you come? You can sing and dance with us and enjoy a nice feast. Maybe that's all that is needed in the beginning,
I agree with you. And I think that sounds like a very natural approach for you. But there are thousands, and in someday we want there to be hundreds of thousands of preachers of Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada encouraged devotees to take inspiration from Krishna, Didami Buddhi Yogam Tam, that they should take inspiration from Krishna. Of course, for me personally, I try to, over the years, decades, I've tried to learn from experience how to deal with things. Now, maybe I'm not so inspired by Krishna, it's more mechanical for me. But Prabhupada said, preachers should take inspiration. But I want to respond to two things. You said that, what were the two? You said that, that you gave this specific formula that we want to be kind and open to devotees or to newcomers, innocent people. So that reminded me of, it reminded me of a story that Yogeshwara likes to tell. I've heard him tell it on a number of occasions. He was with Prabhupada in Geneva, I think it was Geneva, and Prabhupada spoke to this man, Cardinal, forgotten his name. He was a cardinal in the church. And
Cardinal Richelieu.
And they had this kind of
Galileo, sorry, I'm sorry.
Yes, you're right. I think they had this kind of heated discussion, and it was very kind of contentious. Prabhupada, he often did present this idea of thou shalt not kill to Christians, and then, you know, you're eating meat, you know, thou shalt not kill. There's a strong criticism. I mean, this is a tradition. It's just an old thousands of years. Some people say Christianity has been actively very dominant for 1700 years. That's a long time. So here comes Prabhupada criticizing this idea that's, and so the cardinal was arguing and Prabhupada was arguing, and they were going back and forth. And then the next half of the story is that this man came in, and somehow or other, I don't know if it was a previous contact or what, but the man was very gentle, and Prabhupada just sat down and sang a bhajan on the harmonium. And so two completely different presentations of Krishna consciousness. So your point that we present, it was almost like a blanket statement that we should always present in such and such a way, to be friendly and open to people. But to understand the audience, if it's perhaps, especially if it's an individual audience, maybe we don't want to give that kind of open, warm presentation. Perhaps we want to be a little more confrontational, but that, I think, comes from experience. We have to analyze, do I really want to stick my neck out here? I love that video Prabhupada said in Los Angeles, in his garden, the devotees had assembled all these religious professors. So they were, I suppose, mostly in California, but so one of them was Stilson Judah. He was a very good friend of devotees and liked Prabhupada. And so they sat down, and I mean, they were there, and the film was rolling, and Prabhupada says to them, so you study religion? And they said, yes, yes. So Prabhupada said, so you know God? He immediately, the first words out of his mouth, he was challenging these men. These men were professors. They weren't just kids, some hippie kids that Prabhupada was challenging. So, and then he made a joke. Prabhupada made this joke, which I think is absolutely, I love it. I love the joke that he said, so no, they don't, no, we don't know God. So then he said, basically, so you're not theologians. Theologian means to know God. The ology means to know. And so he says, you're not theologians, you're theosophists. Now, this is a take on the word theosophy, because theosophy is of course Annie Besant and what's her name, and what is it, Blavatsky or something. Anyway, so theosophy is a doctrine that's in India. So of course they all knew this. when Prabhupada was making a play on words. I just loved it. I thought it was fantastic. So he's insulting them. He said, "You're not theologists, you're a theosophist." It was beautiful. And I think still in Judah, he laughed. And the others are like, whoa. And then another time I saw Prabhupada, and of course, Prabhupada, he said to us at one point, he said that on a morning walk, he said that, he said, "I want you to get the people of America to stop killing cows." He said, "I cannot do that. I'm a foreigner." He said, "You should do that." So different kinds of, another time in India, we were on the stairs and he was very critical of Indira Gandhi. And he made some statement against Indira Gandhi. And then he turned around, people who were following up the stairs. He says, "But I can say that. I'm an old man. You cannot say that." So many examples of try to understand how to make discriminations in what we say and what the context is and what kind of ability we have to say to people. Am I an old man? Am I a young man? Can I get away with this? Am I a woman? If I'm an old white man, I'm speaking to young Asian women, what will be my impression for them? Or if I'm an old white man and I'm speaking to other old white men, maybe I can get away with murder, but so I think that Prabhupada told us things like that. Another story I love, and one of this, in Iran, the hippies used to hitchhike through and then they used to teach a little English. At that time in Iran, they were obsessed with learning English, military, private schools, everything. So the hippies could get a job teaching English for a couple of months and they could collect some money and travel around the world. So there was, and then a lot of them would visit our little preaching center, our temple. It was a nice place. Anyway, so Prabhupada visited, he was speaking to this woman, wonderful, wonderful woman. She was Gujarati and her husband was, I think Patel she was. Anyway, he was very successful in business there and they were very favorable to devotees. They invited us over to their house and sponsored us and talking to other members of the community, and very friendly, nice people, wealthy people. So Prabhupada was speaking with her. She was sitting right next to the Prabhupada's little table. Prabhupada's sitting on the floor on a cushion, and she was sitting next to Prabhupada. And so there's this hippie kid in the back, and he says, well, it kind of interrupted the conversation a little bit. And he said, so what's wrong with just doing good for people? What's wrong with just doing good for people? And Prabhupada looked at him, and frankly, by 1976, I think that's when this was, Prabhupada had become a little bit irritated with the hippies. And in the beginning, he had to be nice to the hippies because they were becoming devotees. But over the years, he would criticize the devotees. As soon as they started growing hair, he would say, cut your hair, you're looking like a hippie. Or he would say, we're making hippies into happies. And, many things he said, that he was quite critical of the hippies. Devotees sometimes didn't realize that because there was still sort of a affection for the phenomenon of our generation. So this is 1976. Prabhupada looked up at the kid. He says, what good you can do for people? You cannot even take care of yourself. So depending on the circumstance, here he was being very gentle with this wonderful, pious Gujarati woman. And he looked up at the hippie and he said, this hippie kid is just saying some crazy thing, it's almost like, he's thinking that I'm its disciple. I can't decide what the spiritual master is thinking, but it was our responsibility to deal with kids like that. We were the devotees in the temple. Prabhupada didn't expect that there would be these kinds of challenging questions. We should take care of these things. So Prabhupada was, you cannot even take care of yourself. Different places, different circumstances. Now, you said that when somebody asks a question, that's the time to really tell it as it is. But another lesson I learned in Iran is that Americans who are used to free speech are not as likely to judge questions as in some cultures. And I think that I'm like that to a degree. My guard is down when somebody asks a question. But there's a couple of things I've learned over the years about questions. One thing people say in business is that a question in business, of course, a question places a person in a position of power. So there is something about a question that one should take a little care when there's a question. Now, in Iran, I learned that we should be careful when somebody asks a question. And we should ask ourselves the question, why is this person asking such a question? Is this question a challenging question, or is this question a sincere question to understand Krishna consciousness and advance in Krishna? And it can be difficult to really discriminate between the two. Is somebody asking this seemingly challenging question out of sincerity, or is it really a challenging question? Or for a while I had these friends in New York. They were a married couple from China, from Shanghai. So the woman once told me that somebody came to the temple, and she later understood that it was somebody from the government or somebody that was kind of spying on them. So this person asked a lot of questions, and she was very naive. She's this young, new devotee, and even though she was Chinese, she should have known better. She just answered all the questions. Oh, yes, we do this, we do that. So what are the motivations? Why are you asking? Of course, it's more important. It's not very important in the United States. It's more important in China or in Iran to understand why somebody's asking a question. Are you asking this question because you're going to get me in trouble? Do you really want to know about Krishna consciousness? So I think in that circumstance, there's three kinds of questions. One is that innocent. Another is challenging. And another is one that could potentially harm. So at least in my mind, I've made those three distinctions. Now, just to summarize, my last point is that something Atreya said to us in Iran, that we should be careful what we say to people because it could get our throat slit. So I took that seriously, and maybe he was being exaggerating a little bit, but after about 2 or 3 years in Iran, I realized, well, in the United States, we don't get our throat slit. We just get marginalized. That's how people deal with us in the United States. And in my opinion, we've succeeded at that. No devotee that I've heard in the United States has had his or her throat slit. But somehow we have succeeded in becoming marginalized. And I think that, at least in part, it's because we've just said any damn thing.
Okay, thank you for giving a very nice explanation about how we must judge how that questioner is coming. That's very important information because I wasn't aware of all these different nuances. And I think that's important to keep in mind. By the way, Srila Prabhupada also said, damn your Krishna consciousness at one point when one devotee was protesting about being sent somewhere. But Prabhupada, if I go there, what will happen to my consciousness? And Prabhupada said, damn your consciousness. So that's just something I'm tossing in there.
Yeah, there's another one in Vrindavan that Prabhupada was trying to solve some issue, some practical issue. They're building the temple. So there's always some problem, devotees are ill prepared for dealing with so many things and complexities. And so Prabhupada's consulting with some of the so-called senior devotees who are in their 20s. So one of the sannyasis said as a solution, he says, so well, we just have to become Krishna conscious. And Prabhupada said, another practical solution. Yeah. Prabhupada is very pragmatic. So, a lot of talking. More time spent on Q&A than on the lecture. So, Bhagavan Narada Prabhu.
Yes.
What shall we do now?
I guess we can call it a day. I see Melinda still here. Melinda, are you still here? Would you like to add any questions? This is Melinda's first time joining us. She's Nomadic Yoga. She's a really inspiring yoga teacher locally.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody.
She's been to our Rath Yatra festivals and she knows a lot about meditation and things like that. She's somewhat familiar, I think, with I guess a lot more now, but did you have any questions or anything you'd like to add? It'd be nice to hear from you.
It's a lot. It's a lot that I don't understand, but it's a lot that parallels to some of what I do understand. And so it being my first one, I was just doing a lot of listening, and this is kind of odd, but it was really relaxing just to hear you guys talk. Just like it was a very everything you all said was very intentional, and you could tell that you have a lot of faith in what you say and what you believe in. I really appreciate that.
Great. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I think you really got, especially during the question and answer, it was very much like stepping into an internal discussion. So the talk itself was a little formal, but some of the question and answer was very much kind of
Behind the scenes.
Internal discussion among ourselves, trying to figure out some of our own directions, how we're presenting ourselves. And so I don't know how you take that, but from my perspective, just as out of curiosity, I would be fascinated to hear such a kind of a, getting to go into the room of a few priests and hear them talk about whatever they talk about. I wasn't aware that you were kind of a, I don't know how to say it, kind of a, not in our inner circle, I guess.
I actually didn't realize that. Was this inner circle? I saw it online and I've always wanted to join.
It's
Okay.
I had to also apologize to Melinda if I had became too heavy in what I was saying and put her off.
No,
I didn't mean to do that.
No, that was actually the part that I liked about it, was that there was so much conviction and so much love. But there was also a lot of like non-judgment. Like, there was a lot of like, I'm not gonna push anybody, like I'm just gonna tell it like it is though. Which I can appreciate. I mean, why not?
Thank you, Melinda. That's reassuring for me to hear.
You're welcome.
Me too.
And there was a lot of Googling going on at the same time as well. There was a lot of so there was also some internal dialogue within myself that was created because of some of what y'all said.
I can understand now Bhagwan Narada being a little protective of his fledgling group of people, fanatical preaching, because I can tend to become like that. So Bhagwan Narada, you have to rein me in next time if I go out of line, okay?
No, we're good. We're good. The Sundays are always open and Wednesdays, so we usually get 1 or 2 new people every other week or something. It's not as much as it used to be, but I kind of like to keep things a little more general and simple, just in case. But there's a lot of juice flowing today. No problem. Yeah, I'm glad she joined. I think it's nice if we can get more and more people online. And now that we're settled, and we're not settled, but we're in a new place, we're looking to kind of do more videos and stuff online to kind of get more people to join us. And of course, once this thing hopefully clears up or it becomes more stabilized, then we'll be able to go out and meet more people and whatnot and go back to our events, especially like with Dayananda Prabhu was saying about these festivals. I want to start holding public Gaur Purnimas or public Golden Moon festivals and public Janmashtami festivals, even if it's at a park. I don't want to keep it so internal anymore. I think that we can go out and take these things out and make them colorful events. And I feel like that people will naturally be attracted to these things. We had our Rath Yatra festival and everybody seemed to enjoy it. It was something different. So why not do we have festivals every month, different things that we can observe. So I think that'll be a nice attraction for everybody.
Oh, anytime there's Harinam, it benefits the whole world.
Yeah.
So, yes, that's wonderful.
Okay. So we have wrapped up Sunday. Then we have Tuesday at 6:30 and Wednesday at 6:30. Tuesday is a little bit more of an open discussion with Narottam. He just kind of, he goes off for usually an hour and a half or so, and it's more open. And then Wednesday should be Jivananda Prabhu. We'll see if he wants to join still. And then of course next Sunday at 1. So I guess we're finished. So thank you all so much for joining in. Thanks, Melinda, for keeping up with us. Hope you can make it again. And when this is all over, we can continue to do more of those yoga events with the councilwoman. Those were really nice.
Yeah, they were.
So we'll keep you in the loop of everything. Thank you all so much. Y'all have a good day.
Thank you very much for being so patient and tolerant of me. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I'll be long.
Haribol. Thank you, Dayananda Prabhu.